Welcome to Think Pride. I am Kyriakos Gold, and tonight we're celebrating all the colors of the rainbow. Do we need to strengthen existing legal protections? Or do you think what we've done so far is enough?
Look, and I think the law, particularly anti-discrimination law, still treats identity as a silo. We still have the Race Discrimination Act, the Sex Discrimination Act, and so on, and even our own Victorian legislation, to some extent, I think means that we've constantly got to try and fit our identities into one or the other. So I think, and that's inherent to law. I think if we could try and adopt a more intersectional approach to the way those legal protections operate, so that we recognise that our day-to-day lived experience doesn't happen in silos. I'm not this identity one day and another the other day, that we live our lives in sum total. So I'd like to see, I suppose, a law that reflects that reality, and a law that really does appreciate the complexities of intersectionality in lived experience.
It'd be like someone experiencing prejudice and then having to section themselves off. Am I experiencing prejudice because of my gender? Was it my sexuality, or was it because of my race? Or actually it probably was a combination of all three. And right now, a lot of the laws and the understanding doesn't necessarily reflect the impact of the three identities and intersections. That's what we mean by intersectionality.
Todd, is that possible? Is that on the cards?
So when we think about the legal changes that have occurred in Victoria, it's a vastly different landscape. When we think about the challenges that remain in other parts of Australia, we see just how progressive the state of Victoria has become when it comes to protecting LGBTQ+ people under the law. But there are challenges that do remain. So the ones that are forefront in my mind are about strengthening our laws to protect and to allow children to make decisions about their body, particularly trans kids. Right now, the legislation is twisted in and amongst young people and children having to fight for their gender identity within the children's court, which is, as a space, has not historically been the safest for kids. It's often a space in which parents are fighting against each other, and the child often, or the young person often, ages out from critical care about their gender identity and the hormones or the treatment that is available to them. So that's something that is logistically tied up with changing legislation. Other things include families of choice and the relationships that we have as queer people with families of choice, and how that occurs when it comes to the death of queer people and trans and gender diverse people, and who has ownership and control of our body after death. Right now, the Coroner's Act says that it goes to the senior next of kin, which is generally a family member, if you're not married, your partner. And that is really complicated because for many queer or trans people, we have families of choice. And often our families of choice are created because of the tension between our families of origin. But the law doesn't recognise that in particular cases. So there are challenges like those that still remain, but by and large, the transformation of the legislative calendar in Victoria has seen significant changes for LGBTQ+ people.
So what happens when somebody lives in New South Wales and faces a number of issues, and then they come to Victoria? What are the services for them?
I mean, one, we have a Pride Centre, which is the largest Pride Centre in the Southern Hemisphere. Technically, it's the largest in the world, but San Francisco is over 3 different buildings. So we claim the largest in the world in one building. But that is just a microcosm of the services available to LGBTQ+ people in the city. And I want to make the point that it's in the city because those services, by and large, don't extend out for a variety of factors to regional and rural Victoria. And part of the journey, I think, for queer people and trans people who access those services are looking for the intersectional policies. Is this place safe for all of me? You know, we could walk into a queer site and be safe or feel protected about our queer identity, but often we have to leave something at the door. For me, often when I go to a queer organisation, I leave my Aboriginality at the door. Same time, when I go to an Aboriginal organisation, I leave my queerness at the door. You know, there rarely has been created an organisation that centres all of me. And that's the next policy challenge for not only government, but for community organisations.
Who can we find at the Pride Centre? Is that a long list that you can't remember, or?
I can help you out there. Well, you can obviously find Joy Media, you can find the archives, you can find Switchboard, Thorn Harbour Health, the Monash Transgender Clinic is there, Star Health is there.
Minus 18.
Minus 18.
Switchboard.
Yeah.
The Australian GLBTIQ Multicultural Council, AGMC, is also there as well.
Yeah.
So,
and MQFF.
MQFF, and sorry, who? Queer Archives, yes. Transgender Victoria, yes. Kuri Pride, yes. So all the cool kids are there.
Look, I think what we have currently, to a degree, has worked, but I think all the conversations we've had around the religion bill and all that has definitely raised concerns about existing laws. I think when you look at the community, how we're much broader in representation, we may need to revisit to strengthen in regards to schools, settings that we haven't really talked about previously because we're much more visible than we have been in the past.
So I think, Kyriakos, your question about law and equality as it pertains to LGBTIQA plus people and whether we have far to go, it's an interesting situation because on this continent now known as Australia, we have a lot of privileges and rights that were hard won over many years, and we do feel very lucky compared to, for some of us, our countries of origin. But there is still quite far to go. And, Todd's right in that Victoria as a state has led the way. But at a federal level and across different states, there's still a lot to do. Some of the wins that we might, people in the community now take things like birth certificates for trans people being amended to reflect our true identities as shocking that this doesn't happen in other states and in other countries, because people, great people whose shoulders we all stand on, fought so hard for that for so many years. But I think the other important thing to think when we think about how far we have to go, and does the federal legislation go far enough in protecting LGBTIQA plus equality, we have to look at a global climate currently where far-right extremism and fascism are beginning to emerge from a populist imagination where people think that they're being persecuted against if other people get equality, which is a lie. Equality means we are being lifted up to your level because historically we've been trodden down. But for some reason, there's this fear that if other people are treated like human beings, that takes away from someone. We had pictures just last weekend of fascists doing the Nazi salute in St Kilda, in a multicultural queer heartland, in a so-called progressive central city area of this city. It's a threat that's not going away, and it's something that legislators need to take more seriously to protect us. We have bills being debated in the US around gender identity, where trans people are the canary in the coal mine. People and legislators and people in power divide us to control us. And they see that there's a fear or hatred or misunderstanding around trans people. So they're going to use that to try and pass a gender identity law prohibiting people from dressing in clothes of the opposite sex. This is being debated as we speak in multiple US states. But with trans people as the canary in the coal mine, someone might vote for that thinking, oh, I don't want a scary man in a dress, completely out of a place of ignorance and fear and hatred about trans people. But what does that mean for women wearing pants? What does ideas about traditional gender identity being legislated in this way mean about women becoming doctors or scientists? What does it mean about men becoming nurses? We see this, people on the far right love to talk about the slippery slope of equality because how terrible that people will be treated equally as human beings. The actual slippery slope is when they come for one of our rights, we are the canary in the coal mine to erode everyone's freedoms. in this country, I think, with the law and how we do have still quite far to go, there's great progress in Victoria around this, but around the country, the dialogue around intersex infants being operated on to surgically assign a gender while they are still infants, with parents who are often confused and have no idea what's going on and what they're consenting to. We're having huge discussions legally and policy-wise in Victoria to improve that, but that is a huge problem around this country. Workplace protection rights for trans and intersex people in federal parliament continue to be eroded, and other protections like that. And I would also say one of the biggest problems in my mind about the law when it comes to equality is that it does not apply equally to people and authorities. We have horrific abuses of power from the police that are investigated by a toothless IBAC that find nothing. You know, I was reading the Operation Lind investigations into the Hares and Hyenas incident the other day that concluded the police officers believe that sexuality and race were not factors. But when an individual is being racially profiled as matching the alleged perpetrator, they deem it justifiable force to give someone acquired brain injuries and traumatic spine and arm injuries that will impact them and their communities for the rest of their lives. What's going on with the law there? So I think we've got a long way to go until everyone is equally safe and protected in this country.
Kat, Sasha and myself, we are co-founders of Trans Pride March Melbourne and Trans Sisters United, both grassroots organisations that we established together. And I think for us, what we noticed through the establishment of what we were doing is the need and space for trans people of colour and queer people of colour as well. And I think for what we established and wanted to put forward with Trans Pride March Melbourne and the Trans Pride concert we put on was to really bring the voices of those people to the city of Melbourne, to main stages at Federation Square, down this street right here, Swanston Street, and showing the visibility of trans people. And as a grassroots organisation, we did all of that mostly by ourselves with support from Transgender Victoria as well and Federation Square. And there was people supporting us, but we did that as 3 individual trans women from this city. And I think as a community and as a nation, we shouldn't have to fight so hard to create those spaces for those people. But that's the reality of the situation, and similar to what Mum Otto said, is that we don't have full equality because we wouldn't have to fight so hard for those spaces and for those voices and people to be seen and heard. So I agree that we still have a very long way to go till we reach full equality.
Thank you, everyone, for thinking Pride with us. I'm Kyriakos Gold. Good night.